The attic key felt unnaturally cold in my palm as I ascended the creaky stairs. Grandma's house had always given me the creeps, but I never expected to uncover its darkest secret. The musty air hit me like a wall, carrying whispers of a past long buried. As I fumbled with the lock, a chill ran down my spine, not from the draft, but from a sense of being watched. The door swung open, revealing stacks of dusty boxes and forgotten memories. But it was the small, ornate trunk tucked in the corner that caught my eye. Little did I know, opening it would unravel a family mystery that would haunt me forever. The attic air was thick with dust and secrets. I'd been putting off this task for weeks, but with the house going on the market soon, I couldn't delay any longer. Grandma Evelyn's death 3 months ago left a void in our family, and now her house stood as a silent testament to a life I thought I knew. I picked up the key, turning it over in my hand. It was small, ornate, and clearly old. The note's handwriting was shaky, as if written by someone elderly or in distress. I glanced around the cluttered space, wondering where this mysterious nursery could be hiding. Cardboard boxes and old furniture crowded the room, creating shadowy corners that seemed to shift in the dim light filtering through the dusty windows. I started methodically sorting through the nearest pile, my mind racing with possibilities. An hour into my task, I uncovered a trunk that looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. The lock was rusted, but with a bit of effort, it gave way. Inside, I found a treasure trove of vintage toys and baby clothes, all perfectly preserved. A porcelain doll with glass eyes stared up at me, its painted smile unsettling in the gloam. As I lifted out a stack of yellowed baby blankets, a photo album slid into view. My curiosity piqued. I opened it, expecting to see familiar faces from my family's past. Instead, I was greeted by images of children I'd never seen before. Page after page of smiling faces, none of whom resembled anyone in our family. A chill ran down my spine as I noticed dates penciled beneath each photo. They all fell within a 5-year period, ending abruptly in 1972. The same year my mother was born. I was so engrossed in the album that I nearly jumped out of my skin when my phone buzzed. It was a text from the realtor, reminding me she'd be stopping by tomorrow to discuss listing the house. I texted back a quick confirmation, my mind still reeling from what I'd found. As I set the phone down, my eyes were drawn to a large wardrobe in the corner. It seemed out of place, pushed awkwardly against the wall. With a sense of trepidation, I approached it, running my hands along its ornate surface. My fingers caught on something, a hidden latch. Heart pounding, I pulled, and the wardrobe swung away from the wall, revealing a door I never knew existed. The key in my pocket suddenly felt very heavy. With trembling hands, I fit the key into the lock. It turned with a rusty groan, and the door swung open, revealing a small, musty room. Sunlight streamed through a grimy window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. This must be the hidden nursery. The room was a time capsule. Faded wallpaper peeled at the corners, decorated with cheerful animals that now seemed eerie in the dim light. A crib stood against one wall, its once white paint now yellowed with age. Shelves lined another wall, filled with books and more of those unsettling porcelain dolls. As I stepped inside, the floorboard beneath my foot shifted slightly. Curious, I knelt down and pried it up, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, I found a leather-bound diary. My grandmother's name was inscribed on the first page, the handwriting matching the note I found earlier. I sat on the floor, my back against the crib, and began to read. The diary entries started with my grandmother's struggles with infertility, her desperation palpable in every word. But as I read on, my blood ran cold. There were references to a local orphanage, to adoption plans that seemed far from legal. A newspaper clipping fell from between the pages. The headline screamed, "Local children missing, authorities baffled." The date matched the last photos in the album I found earlier. My mind raced, trying to connect the dots. Could my grandmother have been involved in something so sinister? I thought of my mother, born the same year the photos and diary entries stopped. A horrible suspicion began to form. Suddenly, I heard the front door open downstairs. Panic gripped me. The realtor wasn't supposed to be here until tomorrow. I quickly gathered the diary and clippings, shoving them into my bag. As I was about to leave the nursery, my eyes fell on a small safe tucked in the corner. Without thinking, I tried the key from the envelope. To my shock, it fit. Inside, I found documents, adoption papers, birth certificates, all with dates and names matching the missing children. And at the bottom, a photo of my grandmother standing next to a man I'd never seen before, but who looked strikingly familiar. Footsteps on the stairs. My heart pounded as I realized I was trapped in this room full of decades-old secrets. I heard someone entering the attic. Panicked, I closed the nursery door as quietly as I could, leaving it slightly ajar. Through the crack, I saw an elderly man step into the attic. He looked around nervously before heading straight for the hidden door. My breath caught in my throat. How did he know about this room? As he pushed the door open, our eyes met. In that moment of terror, recognition hit me like a thunderbolt. It was my grandfather, the man I was told had died before I was born. He looked as shocked as I felt. "Mara," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I've been waiting for someone to find the truth. It's time to make things right." The documents in my bag suddenly felt like they weighed a ton. Whatever secrets this house had been hiding, I realized I'd only scratched the surface. I sat across from my grandfather in the kitchen, a lifetime of secrets between us. The police would arrive soon, but for now, we talked. He spoke of regrets, of lives destroyed, and of a chance at redemption. As sirens wailed in the distance, I was left wondering, could exposing these long-buried crimes bring healing, or would it only cause more pain? Some truths, once unearthed, can never be buried again. The house that once seemed like a simple inheritance now felt like a Pandora's box. As the first police car pulled up, I realized our family would never be the same. The brass nameplate on the mahogany door read Drive E. Hartley, Chief of Psychiatry. My stomach churned as I traced the faded letters with trembling fingers. This wasn't supposed to be here. Blackwood Apartments was a sleek, modern complex, or so I thought. As the newest real estate agent assigned to this open house, I'd expected marble countertops and smart home features. Instead, I found myself face to face with a relic from the building's dark past. My phone buzzed, displaying a text from an unknown number. "Welcome back, Dr. Hartley. Your patients are waiting." I'm not a doctor. I've never set foot in this building before. So why did it feel like the walls were whispering my name? My name's Mia Chen, and I'm a real estate agent barely scraping by in this cutthroat market. When my boss dumped the Blackwood Apartments listing on me, I should have known it was bad news. But desperation has a way of clouding your judgment. As I waited for potential buyers to arrive, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The newly renovated lobby gleamed with marble and chrome, but shadows seemed to linger in every corner. The scent of fresh paint couldn't quite mask an underlying odor, something medicinal and vaguely unsettling. The first couple to arrive were the Johnsons, an elderly pair who moved with an eerie familiarity through the building. Mrs. Johnson ran her hand along the wall, murmuring, "They've covered up so much." "Excuse me?" I asked, trying to maintain my professional smile. Mr. Johnson's eyes snapped to mine, unnervingly sharp. "Oh, nothing, dear. Just admiring these changes." As I led them through the model apartment, Mrs. Johnson kept pausing, cocking her head as if listening for something. Mr. Johnson asked pointed questions about the building's history that I couldn't answer. Their behavior was so odd that I almost missed the loose panel in the living room wall. As Mrs. Johnson leaned against it, the panel popped open, revealing a small cavity. Before I could stop her, she reached in and pulled out a stack of yellowed papers. Well, Mr. Johnson said, his voice suddenly cold. "Looks like they missed some things during the renovation." I snatched the papers away, my heart pounding. They were old patient records, filled with disturbing notes and treatments that made my stomach churn. I shoved them back into the wall, but the damage was done. The Johnsons exchanged a look that sent shivers down my spine. "We'll be in touch," Mrs. Johnson said as they left, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. I barely had time to catch my breath before the next group arrived, a young family with 2 kids. As I plastered on my best sales smile, I couldn't shake the feeling that this open house was spiraling out of control. Little did I know, the real horrors of Blackwood Apartments were just beginning to surface. As I guided the young family through the apartment, their little boy, Tommy, kept wandering off. "He's just curious," his mother laughed nervously, but I couldn't shake my unease. When Tommy disappeared for the third time, we found him in a restricted area, staring at a wall. "What's behind here?" he asked, tapping a section that sounded hollow. Before I could answer, a gruff voice interrupted. "Nothing you need to worry about, kid." It was Jim, the maintenance worker. He shooed us away, but not before whispering to me, "Be careful what you uncover in this place. Some secrets are better left buried." My next visitor was Mr. Zhao, a wealthy investor who seemed more interested in the building's history than its future potential. "I heard rumors about unorthodox treatments conducted here," he probed, his eyes glinting. "Any truth to that?" I was saved from answering by a commotion outside. A group of protesters had gathered, holding signs that read "Remember the Victims" and "No Luxury Over Lives." Their chants echoed through the halls, adding to the growing tension. As I tried to calm the situation, I overheard two visitors arguing heatedly in a corner. "We can't let them turn this place into overpriced apartments," one hissed. "Too many suffered here. It should be a memorial." "And who's going to pay for that?" the other shot back. "At least this way, the building serves a purpose." The debate was cut short when the lights suddenly flickered and died. Panic rippled through the crowd as we realized the electronic security system had locked down, trapping us inside. In the chaos, I stumbled into a room I hadn't noticed before. Fumbling with my phone's flashlight, I illuminated outdated medical equipment and dusty patient belongings. A chill ran down my spine as I realized this room hadn't been part of the renovation. As night fell and tensions rose, the true intentions of my potential buyers began to unravel. They weren't here to purchase apartments. Each had a connection to the building's dark past, and they'd come seeking answers or revenge. In the dim emergency lighting, accusations and revelations flew. The elderly Johnsons were former patients. Mr. Zhao's grandfather had been a doctor here. The arguing couple were descendants of victims and staff. And me? They all turned to me with a mix of anger and desperation. "You must know something," Mrs. Johnson pleaded. "You're Hardley's granddaughter, aren't you?" The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Drive E, hardly the nameplate I'd seen earlier. They thought I was connected to the asylum's notorious director. "I'm not who you think I am," I protested, but my words were drowned out by years of pent-up trauma and rage. As the group closed in, their eyes reflecting decades of pain, I realized the real horror wasn't in the building's history, but in the lives destroyed by institutional abuse and the lengths people would go to expose the truth or keep it hidden. The wail of police sirens finally broke through the night, and we were freed from our harrowing ordeal. As I stumbled out of Blackwood Apartments, shaken but alive, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was now irrevocably part of this building's dark legacy. The protesters vowed to keep fighting, the developers seemed unfazed, and I was left wondering, in a world where profit often trumps humanity, are any of us truly innocent? I deleted the listing from my portfolio, but as I drove away, my phone buzzed with another text. "This isn't over, Dr. Hardley." I realized then that this story was far from concluded. I never thought my tiny home would become my prison. What started as a dream road trip to write about the real America turned into a nightmare of paranoia and suspicion. Strange noises in the night, items moving on their own, and cryptic messages appearing on my laptop. I was losing my mind, or worse, being watched. But nothing could have prepared me for the moment I realized I'd been an unwitting pawn in a cross-country crime. Now, as I sit in this holding cell, I can't help but wonder, was I really documenting America, or was America documenting me? My name's Ethan Reeves, and 6 months ago, I was a 32-year-old aspiring writer with big dreams and an empty bank account. I've been working on my novel for years, but something was missing. I needed real experiences, real stories. That's when the idea hit me, a cross-country road trip to document this true America. Not the glossy postcard version, but the gritty, honest truth of small-town life and forgotten communities. I scraped together every penny I had and bought a used tiny home from a guy named Frank. It was perfect, compact, efficient, with just enough room for me and my writing gear. Frank seemed oddly eager to get rid of it, practically shoving the keys into my hand. I should have seen that as a red flag, but I was too excited about my adventure to notice. The first few days were everything I'd hoped for. I cruised down back roads, stopping in quaint towns with names like Millbrook and Pine Junction. I interviewed local diner owners, farmers, and small-town mayors. My notebook filled with colorful anecdotes and insightful observations. This was the authentic America I'd been searching for. But then, things started to get weird. It began with a smell, a sickly sweet odor that would appear suddenly and vanish just as quickly. I tore the tiny home apart looking for the source, convinced something had died in the walls. But I found nothing. Next came the noises. Late at night, I'd jerk awake to the sound of scratching, like someone or something was trying to claw its way inside. But every time I investigated, flashlight in hand and heart pounding, there was nothing there. No animals, no loose siding, nothing. I tried to rationalize it. The smell was probably just some quirk of the plumbing system. The scratching? Maybe tree branches scraping against the roof as I parked under them. But deep down, a nagging feeling told me something wasn't right. Then my belongings started to move. I'd wake up to find my laptop on the kitchen counter when I distinctly remembered leaving it by the bed. My clothes would be rearranged in the closet. Once, I even found my wallet in the refrigerator. I started to question my own sanity. Was I sleepwalking? Was the stress of the trip getting to me? I considered calling it quits, heading back home to my cramped apartment and dead-end job. But something kept pushing me forward. I had to finish this trip, had to write this book. Little did I know, I was driving straight into a nightmare that would change my life forever. As the days turned into weeks, the strange occurrences intensified. I started receiving calls from unknown numbers. Each time I answered, I was met with either static or heavy breathing on the other end. My cell phone reception became spotty, and my GPS would glitch, sometimes leading me miles off course. One morning, I woke up to find every drawer and cabinet in the tiny home flung open, as if someone had ransacked the place while I slept. My heart raced as I checked for missing items, but everything was just completely rearranged. I couldn't shake the feeling of violation, of unseen eyes watching my every move. Desperate for answers, I began researching the history of my tiny home. What I found chilled me to the bone. The previous owners had all experienced similar phenomena: unexplained noises, items moving, a constant feeling of being watched. More disturbingly, 2 former owners had disappeared without a trace during their own cross-country trips. I tried to contact Frank, the seller, but the number he'd given me was disconnected. When I dug deeper, I discovered that Frank wasn't even his real name. The man who sold me the tiny home was a ghost, leaving no paper trail behind. Paranoia set in. I started noticing a sleek black car that seemed to appear at every rest stop, always keeping its distance but unmistakably present. Was I being followed? And if so, by whom? My laptop became another source of terror. Encrypted messages began appearing on my screen, always displaying coordinates for locations along my route. Against my better judgment, I found myself following these digital breadcrumbs, drawn by a morbid curiosity I couldn't explain. Each coordinate led me to seemingly random locations: an abandoned gas station, a desolate crossroads, a shuttered factory on the outskirts of a dying town. At each stop, the feeling of being watched intensified. Once, I could have sworn I saw a figure ducking behind a rusted-out car, but when I approached, there was no one there. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. I spent nights huddled in the driver's seat, eyes glued to my rearview mirrors, jumping at every shadow. The tiny home that had once represented freedom now felt like a prison on wheels, carrying me towards an unknown but certainly sinister destination. As I crossed into Nevada, the latest set of coordinates flashed on my screen. Something told me this would be the last stop on my ill-fated journey. With trembling hands on the wheel and my heart in my throat, I steered towards what I was sure would be a confrontation with whoever or whatever had been orchestrating this nightmare. The coordinates led me to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Las Vegas. As I pulled up, my phone buzzed with a message: "Package delivered. Well done. Before I could process those words, sirens pierced the air. Police cars swarmed around me, officers emerging with guns drawn. Hands where we can see them, they shouted. Confused and terrified, I complied. As they handcuffed me, I heard one officer say, "We've been tracking this drug mule for months." Drug mule? My mind reeled as they tore apart my tiny home, pulling packages of narcotics from hidden compartments I never knew existed. The truth hit me like a freight train. I'd been an unwitting pawn in an elaborate smuggling operation. The ghost in my tiny home wasn't supernatural, it was all too human. The strange occurrences, the coordinates, the feeling of being watched, it had all been part of their scheme. I wanted to write about the real America. Instead, I'd become entangled in its dark underbelly. I'm writing this from a holding cell, waiting for my court-appointed lawyer. The feds don't believe my story, of course. Why would they? To them, I'm just another drug runner caught red-handed. But I know the truth. I was set up, manipulated from the start. Somewhere out there, Frank and his crew are probably already planning their next job, their next unsuspecting victim. As for me, my cross-country adventure has turned into a one-way trip to federal prison. I finally got my story about the real America, just not the one I thought I'd be telling. I never thought my urban exploration hobby would turn me into a fugitive. But here I am, hiding in a dingy motel room, my hands shaking as I typed this warning. It all started when I broke into the abandoned Thornberry home, that decrepit Victorian orphanage on the edge of town. I expected dust, decay, and maybe some cool photos for my blog. Instead, I uncovered a web of corruption so vast, so horrifying, that powerful people want me silenced. They've already gotten to Detective Lawson. I might be next. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. But the truth about Thornberry home needs to come out, no matter the cost. I've always been drawn to abandoned places, but nothing could have prepared me for what I uncovered at Thornberry home. As an urban explorer, I thought I'd seen it all: crumbling factories, deserted hospitals, forgotten bunkers. But this overgrown Victorian orphanage hidden deep in the woods was different. The moment I stepped inside, the air grew thick with a musty, acrid scent that made my skin crawl. A sudden gust of wind slammed the heavy oak door behind me, and in the silence that followed, I heard what sounded like a child's laughter echoing through the empty halls. My heart raced as I realized I might not be as alone as I thought. I fumbled for my flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom like a knife. Dust motes danced in the light, swirling in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. "Get it together, Alex," I muttered to myself. "It's just an old building." As I moved deeper into the orphanage, my footsteps echoed off the peeling walls. The entryway opened up into what must have been a grand foyer once upon a time. Now, it was a graveyard of broken furniture and shattered dreams. A massive staircase dominated the far wall, its once polished banister now splintered and worn. Something caught my eye near the base of the stairs, a faded photograph lying face down on the floor. I picked it up gingerly, brushing off years of grime. The image showed a group of children, their faces solemn, standing in front of Thornberry home in its prime. But what made my blood run cold were the scratches across the faces of the adults in the picture, deliberate, angry marks that spoke of a rage that had survived decades. I pocketed the photo and made my way to what appeared to be an office. The door creaked open reluctantly, revealing a room frozen in time. Dusty filing cabinets lined the walls, and a heavy wooden desk dominated the center of the space. This must have been where the headmistress, Meredith Thornberry, ran her domain. As I rifled through the drawers, I found stacks of yellowed papers, admission records, financial documents, and correspondence. But it was a small, leather-bound book that caught my attention. The Journal of Meredith Thornberry herself. I flipped it open, and my eyes widened as I read. Cryptic notations about the children, mentions of large, unexplained expenses, and hints of connections to local officials filled the pages. But it was a single line that made my heart skip a beat, another one gone missing. The basement took care of it. A chill ran down my spine as I realized I might be standing in the middle of something far more sinister than just an abandoned orphanage. What had really happened here at Thornberry home? And more importantly, were the perpetrators still out there, ready to protect their dark secrets? I knew I should leave, report this to the authorities. But the investigator in me couldn't let it go. I had to know more. With a deep breath, I turned my flashlight toward the hallway that I knew would lead me to the basement, unaware that my next steps would plunge me into a nightmare I never could have imagined. The basement stairs creaked ominously under my weight as I descended into the darkness. The air grew colder, and the musty smell intensified, mixed with something metallic that made my stomach churn. My flashlight beam danced across the walls, revealing peeling paint and water stains. As I reached the bottom, I swept my light around the room. Rusted pipes snaked across the ceiling, and old shelving units lined the walls. But something felt off. The far wall seemed closer than it should be, given the size of the building above. I approached it cautiously, running my hand along the surface. A slight draft tickled my fingers, and I realized there was a hidden door. My heart pounded as I searched for a way to open it. Finally, I felt a small latch give way, and the false wall swung open with a groan. The hidden room behind it made my blood run cold. Old medical equipment, much of it stained with what I hoped wasn't blood, littered the floor. Restraints hung from a chair bolted to the ground. Filing cabinets lined one wall, and with shaking hands, I pulled open a drawer. Inside were files, dozens of them, each bearing a child's name and a series of dates. As I flipped through them, a horrifying pattern emerged. These weren't just records of the children's stay at the orphanage. They were detailed accounts of experiments, abuse, and in some cases, disposal. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. This was evidence of decades of crimes, carefully documented and hidden away. I needed help to process this, to make sure it was handled properly. I pulled out my phone, relieved to see I had a signal, and dialed the number for Detective Sarah Lawson, an acquaintance who worked cold cases. "Lawson," she answered gruffly. "Sarah, it's Alex Chen. I'm at Thornberry Home, the old orphanage outside of town. You need to see this. I found evidence of, God, I don't even know how to describe it. Abuse, experiments, maybe even murders." There was a long pause before she replied, her voice tense. "Stay put, Alex. Don't touch anything else. I'm on my way." As I waited, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The shadows seemed to shift in the corners of my vision, and every creak of the old building made me jump. I tried to distract myself by piecing together what I'd found, but each revelation only added to the horror. When I heard footsteps above, relief washed over me. But as they drew closer, I realized there were multiple sets. Detective Lawson's voice drifted down, tense and urgent. "Alex? Where are you?" I called out my location, and moments later, Lawson appeared in the doorway, her face grim. But she wasn't alone. Behind her stood Mayor Richards, his face a mask of barely contained fury. "You've stumbled into something bigger than you can imagine, Mr. Chen," the mayor growled. "Something that's kept this town prosperous for generations." Lawson's hand hovered near her holstered gun, her eyes darting between me and Richards. "I didn't know," she whispered. "God help me, I didn't know how deep this went." In that moment, I realized the true horror wasn't just in the past. It was alive and well, protected by the very people meant to uphold the law. I managed to escape that night, but Lawson wasn't so lucky. The official story says she died in a tragic accident while investigating an unstable building. Thornberry Home was quickly demolished, citing safety concerns. Sometimes, I still wake up in a cold sweat, hearing phantom echoes of that fateful night. I know what we uncovered, but with no evidence left, who would believe me? The mayor and his cronies walk free, their secrets buried under rubble and bureaucracy. All I can do now is keep digging, hoping that someday, the truth about Thornberry Home will finally come to light. But at what cost? Like the story? Hit like and subscribe. See you in the next story popping up on your screen at this exact moment.